Okay, the banking industry in Singapore, if you look at it, there are three broad influences on how the banking industry in Singapore shapes. Okay, the first one is the global economic landscape, the regulatory requirements in the world as well as in Singapore, as well as the Singapore economic landscape. And all these three influences will then play a part in the talent needs of the banks in Singapore. Let's take a look at the global economic landscape. I think one of the major influences that you see is the US market. If you look at the chart, for the last 8 quarters or so, there hasn't been any clear trend in the GDP, whether it is actually going up or coming down. What is more worrisome, actually, if you look at the details of it, is that the consumption as well as the investment landscape hasn't been improving. So we hear some talks about the green shoots of the US economy. Honestly speaking, we are not too sure whether the green shoots are plants that we want to see or weeds in the market. Okay, so of course then you have that fiscal cliff issue that was in the papers. If you look at what has been happening, the fiscal cliff has been postponed. It's not actually resolved. So they push it till sometime in February to resolve it. Let's see what happens. Because US is still a powerhouse. If the economy tanks, then of course you feel the impact across the region. Right, so that's for the US. The Eurozone is the other big player that influences the banking industry. Last 4 quarters, as at Q3 of September or September 12, the contraction for the past 4 quarters. Right, even Germany, that is seen to be the most stable European country that is expected to bail out the whole of Europe, their GDP has actually fallen to 0.9%. Right, if you look year on year on Q3 2012. Then of course there's a high employment rate, which means then that you will see a lot more foreigners looking to move out from Europe, from US, to come into Asia because that's where the growth is. So what does it mean for you? It means that you will have more competition in the market, people looking for jobs, fighting for the same pool of jobs. Okay, Asia. Asia is the only good news that we have. It has been a driver of growth for the last 4 years. If you look at the chart, since 2008, June, the growth has been about 32%. So it's actually 7.5% compounded year on year. It will continue to be the driver of growth for 2013. Okay, no doubt about it. And if you look at it, these are the countries that we feel have got a good potential in terms of the economy. China, Taiwan, Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam. So out of the Asia, 8 countries are there. The other 2 countries that are not there, unfortunately, are Hong Kong and Singapore. Okay, let's also take a look at the regulatory requirements, how it influences the banking industry in Singapore. Since the global financial crisis, there has been more and more regulatory requirements. These requirements are getting more and more complex. You would have heard about the Volcker Rule, you have heard about the Basel III, the Dodd-Frank Act, which is like, I think comes out to be about 2,000 over pages. And they're going to implement changes that is going to be sweeping across every corner of the banking industry. So that is US. But whatever the US does, they are the ones who will actually take the lead, and whatever they do will actually influence the rest of the world as well. And how does this impact the Singapore's economic landscape? GDP for Singapore outlook for 2012, the estimate is coming in about 1.2 to 1.3%. So not very exciting growth that we have. The forecast initially was 1.5, but we are seeing probably it's going to come in about 1.2 to 1.3. The growth momentum is slowing. And outlook for 2013, the GDP is coming in between 1 to 3%. So when the analysts say 1 to 3%, it's probably going to be 2%, right? 1 to 3, that's usually the price. That's usually how it works. Inflation for the full year is high, 4.5%, which is higher than the forecast of 3.5 to 4%. Economists' forecast for the coming year is 3.5 to 4.5%. Might be higher. If you look at the COE prices now, Cat A at 92,000, 93,000, I think we are probably going to be on the higher end of the forecast for 2013. Unemployment rates in Singapore, as at Q3 2012, is 1.9%. Okay, this is the lowest in 14 years of Singapore's economy. So what this means is that most of the people are gainfully employed, so there's actually a shortage of talent in the market. Now, seeing the broader picture of the global economic landscape, regulatory requirements, Singapore's economic landscape, so how does this translate into the talent requirement in the banking industry? I mean, that's the purpose why you guys are here. You want to know what is it in for me, what are the prospects that we have in the banking industry. So let's talk a bit about that. Okay, across the banks, hiring trend is likely to be similar to what has happened in the year 2012. Okay, unlikely to have huge increase in the hiring headcount. There will be pockets of selective hiring in certain areas. And hiring activity is likely to pick up in Q2 and Q3. This is Singapore's banking trend. Because most of the banks pay bonus in February, March, and then that's where people take the bonus, and then they start to do the merry-go-round and start to change jobs amongst the different banks. So we foresee the hiring activity will pick up in Q2 and Q3. Banks are increasingly hiring on a contract basis. So you don't be surprised if you go for a job interview and they offer the role, I will hire you on a 1-year contract or on a 2-year contract. So this is becoming common. The high inflation coupled with low unemployment rate means that for certain hot jobs that are very niche, okay, it is a job seekers market. So if you have got certain skill sets that the bank needs, you are very well placed to negotiate for a good salary. Okay, but conversely, the influx of foreigners from Europe and US actually means that there's actually an excess supply of talent in some areas. So it is a very strange situation now where we have supply of talent, but in some of them in the wrong places. And the government's regulation, if you look at it, MAS has tightened, or rather MOM has tightened regulations on hiring foreign talent. So there's actually a lot more stiffer competition for hiring local talent. And MAS is also looking at upskilling the financial sales and advisory roles. Okay, so what this means is that they are trying to put in certain minimum standards in terms of qualification, in terms of education. So some of the jobs that we see that are traditionally open to diploma holders or O-level holders are now being upskilled, where they require the candidate to either have a diploma or to have a degree. Okay, this is a quick market scan. As a recruiter, that's what we do, right? We scan the market, we look at who's hiring, who's firing, and this is roughly the market intelligence. If you look at it, in the 4 broad sectors of corporate banking, private and consumer banking, technology and operations, support units, meaning your compliance, your audit, legal, HR, hiring for replacement is done selectively across the banks, which means that there are some banks where if somebody resigns, they're not going to replace. Okay, so that is the reality. I think they are trying to increase the productivity, meaning that if your friend resigns, tough luck, you do 2-person's job. Okay, so that's the reality. There are some expansions going on. Commodities trade finance is popular. So if you understand what is commodities trade finance or you have done internship in that department, you have got an added advantage. Okay, corporate banking is coming up because the Malaysian banks have come into Singapore and they're trying to beef up this space. So these are where you have your RMs, your relationship managers who are servicing corporate clients, like your SMEs as well as your mid-cap corporates. Transaction banking is also, there's expansion for transaction banking in some of the foreign and local banks. Then of course the Malaysian banks are trying to get in as well. So reduction, there was a mass layoff for the commodities trade finance in one of the foreign banks, and the whole team actually went up to the commodities trade finance of another of the foreign banks. So there was some movement there. Then transaction banking, some of the banks are cutting down on headcount. Private banking space, there is selective expansion, meaning that if you have read the news, a lot of the banks are now focusing on servicing the wealthy. So the number of millionaires are actually growing in China, Indonesia, Thailand, even Singapore. So so there's this focus on servicing this group of clients. Foreign banks are growing in some of the space, some of the local banks as well. Consumer banking, local banks are hiring, so there will always be those evergreen positions like your contact center roles, your sales roles, customer service officers. There are new entrants to the industry. Two of the Chinese banks have been given the full banking license to operate in Singapore. So there's a possibility that they will actually start to have more branches in Singapore, which means good news for you guys. They will definitely need to hire people. So that is some good news there. Then conversely, some foreign banks have seen a hiring freeze in the consumer banking space. Now, tech and ops, there are still hiring going on in technology and operations in the infra space or the technology subject matter experts. But these are all, they're all looking for experienced hires. And then, of course, in the technology and operations space, some of the businesses have been outsourced, like the call centers. Some of the banks have outsourced them. Some of the middle office roles, like the operations, have been outsourced to Europe, where they feel that it's cheaper. And specialized knowledge in compliance has always been quite a hot job. Okay, so as you sit there looking at this, then in summary, what are the opportunities, or where are the opportunities for me as a fresh graduate or as a graduate in 1 or 2 years working experience, or for somebody who wants to move into the banking space? So those banks that have got a strong presence in Asia, because if you have seen the chart earlier, Asia's growth, we are still expecting Asia to grow. So if you are in this space, you're actually in your business is going to grow. Okay, so that's where the growth will be and the opportunities will be. Talent pipeline positions, the banks will still be hiring. So your management associate programs, your graduate associate programs, even in a downturn, normally the banks do not cut. They do not really cut down on pipeline hiring. So if you are an exceptional student with very good qualifications, the management associate program will be some place that you can look at applying. Okay, then middle and back office roles like your operations, we will still be looking at people. And of course, if you're currently majoring in risk, I think SMU has got a risk module or a master's in risk management. So those regulatory and compliance positions or people with those background, you'll be in quite a good demand. A footnote there, I just need, just have to be aware that moving forward, I think as a fresh grad looking for a role, you have to be, or even as an experienced hire, you have to be prepared to take on contract roles. Okay, even if it means that you are hired as a third-party contractor. Okay, third-party contractor meaning that, for example, DBS, I get a staff through Kelly Services, and then you're working in DBS Bank, but you are a third-party contractor. Okay, so the landscape is a little bit gloomy. Okay, but there are still avenues and there are still jobs available. Okay, the question is a matter of looking out for them and whether you're willing to take a contract role just to get into the banking space and then get converted when the economy recovers. Okay, so that's pretty much all that I have.